everyone, I'm Lucy from General Assembly and welcome to today's session, 5 Things in FMCG, moderated by Lucio, who will be in discussion with panelists Linda, Drew and Paul. To tell you a little more about General Assembly, we're a global tech education company empowering people to do work they love by helping them upskill in technology, business, data and design. You can visit us online at ga.co to check out all of our offerings, from classes and workshops to longer format courses and free events like this, currently all running live and online. Before we begin the session, I'm going to run through some housekeeping information. For this webinar, attendees have no video and are muted, so don't worry if you can't see yourself. To participate in the webinar today, I'd like to point out the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll see 3 functions: the chat box, the Q&A, and a poll. My colleague Ingrid will be behind the scenes supporting the chat and Q&A, plus we'll run a poll for you to participate in at the beginning of the session. If you have content-related questions, please use the Q&A box and we will answer as many as we can at the end of the session. This allows us to have all of our questions in one place so we don't miss any. If you have any troubleshooting issues, GA-related inquiries, or general comments about the presentation, please pop these in the chat box and our team will follow up with you if necessary. A recording of the event will be emailed to you in the next week. Lastly, it would be wonderful if everyone could take a couple of minutes after today's event to fill out this feedback form, which we will link in the chat box at the end of the event. Without further ado, I'll now pass on to Lucio to kick off today's event. Thank you everyone and enjoy today's webinar.
Well, welcome to Advertising Week Briefings 5 Things. So Advertising Week Briefings 5 Things is a series of monthly educational events where I interview industry experts on 5 things worth knowing about the industry, about their industry, right? Last month, we had a glorious reunion with 3 female advertising agency leaders talking about the world of advertising agencies, part of the International Women's Week, big celebration. And tonight, we're going to talk about the world of FMCG, or fast-moving consumer goods. But before I start the night, I would like to thank all the people who made this event possible. I would like to thank Natalia and Emily, who work on Lucio.ai, my team. They're volunteers that helped this to get this event together. Ingrid and Lucy and the whole team at General Assembly, and of course, the team from Advertising Week APAC. Gauri, who is the social media manager at Advertising Week APAC, and it's covered today's session, all right? So I'm your host, Lucio Ribeiro, and I'm a marketing consultant and founder of Lucio.ai, a business that helps senior marketers with their digital needs. I'm also a lecturer of artificial intelligence and digital marketing at RMIT and marketing sites at Deakin. In today's panels, we'll talk about FMCG. The hashtag for today is hashtag 5 things, as with the number 5 things. Just get it shorter, easier. 5 things, all right? So you can take print screens of us. You're gonna make some face. You're gonna have some drinks. You can hopefully Linda, Drew, and Paul give some quotable tweets. We can have quotable tweets. Nice little faces for Instagram. You can have some wine. Anyway, so welcome Linda, welcome Drew, welcome Paul. It's a pleasure having you here with me.
Thanks, Lucio.
Thank you for making the time, and that's better than Netflix, huh? Spend the night with me. Wow, what a big dream. Anyway, before we kick off, would you please give the audience a little bit of your background and what you're currently up to? Let's start with you, Linda.
Sure. Well, I'm the CEO and founder of Almo Milk. Got my sort of funny jumper on. We are an Australian grown almond milk company focused on making sustainable, nutritious and healthy products. And a bit about my background, very passionate about food, never been in FMCG before, basically winging it pretty much most of my life. but really curious about food marketing and bettering the products that we put on consumer shelves.
Oh, you're not going to give the Dave Beckham and Victoria Beckham story? Come on, Linda.
Gosh, Lucy, you're putting me on the spot here.
Come on, that's so good. You gotta share that.
There is a cooking show that started again. I might have been on the first season, might have burnt my aprons. It's called MasterChef, but no, I took off to London years ago and became a private chef for interesting people, and I'm very passionate about cooking, although I must say I've been eating takeaway meals for the last few days recently. Something that, you know, less time to cook at home, more time to focus on the business.
Alrighty. So thank you, Linda. How about you, Drew? Just introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Thanks, Lucio. So my name's Drew Davis. I'm currently a portfolio director at Mars Wrigley. What that really means is hopefully I'm the guy that's supplying you guys with all of the treats and chocolate that you need right now to get through these crazy times. Hopefully you're out there buying Maltesers and M&Ms and all the good stuff to keep you going through this. A little bit different for me. I've been in the FMCG industry for 14 years and worked my way through the big scary guys like Nestle, Mondelez, and now Mars Wrigley, and very much focused in food and beverage. So passionate about food and beverage, and spent a lot of time with new products and launching NPD and all that exciting stuff, but now very entrenched in the world of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, as I like to sometimes think of it, but definitely not as exciting as the film, and no river of chocolate, unfortunately.
You know, I don't know, first time we met, Drew, probably like, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, 7 years ago. We never worked together, but I used to work with Mondelez, and you're always around there. You're always trying to escape from me. Good on you. But it's been a long time. So thank you. Thanks for joining the panel today. It's going to be very interesting. And lastly, my good friend, Paul.
Hey, hello. So I'm Paul Connell. A little bit like Drew, I spent over a decade at Unilever, most recently at a board level as the managing director and head of marketing of our refreshments division. So combating chocolate with ice cream and a cup of tea to wash it down. Was the director of our Ben & Jerry's business. I'm passionate about unlocking ways to do great and do good. Spent the last year running my own business, working to help people big and small do the same, find those sweet spots to be sustainable and thrive. But in truth, mostly right now, what that really looks like is I'm sat in calls like this, permanently paranoid that at any point my 4-year-old will burst in half naked, twerking, singing Gangnam Style, which is worryingly his latest trick. So if that happens, be prepared and just watch, because it's kind of amazing. And you can't stop looking. So fingers crossed it doesn't, but be prepared.
We gotta make the news. So that's a little bit about us, but Lucy, how about we launch a poll so we can understand our audience a little bit more? Would be interesting knowing what is your background? We have currently about 115 people. So if you just give us a quick vote, and so we can understand what is your background and what you're here, so we can customize this a little bit better for you. In the meantime, I note that each one of you had a glass with something. What? I'm drinking wine. I have my wine here. So what do you guys have around there?
Come on, Linda.
Oh gosh, I've got the tequila. We got a tequila. It's actually dedicated and designed by a brilliant artist from New York. And it actually says, be honest. So I will be as honest and authentic tonight as possible with my tequila.
How about you, Drew?
For me, it's a gin and tonic. So I'm not sure if anyone's spotted, but I'm a big fan of the guys out at Four Pillars, so not too far out of Melbourne. And they've just released a new collaboration with a Japanese distillery. So picked up a bottle of that, and that's my tipple for tonight.
Paul, do you have anything special on you?
I'm with Drew. I'm supporting local businesses, right? So Bloodwood Winery in Orange is a fan favourite. So I'm definitely helping them as much as I can at the moment, which might not be good for my health, but it's definitely good for the sanity.
Good on ya. Alrighty, so we had all the pleasantries out of the way. Thank you very much. So we have a mix of viewers coming from production agency, digital agency, marketers, startups, freelancer, a lot of students here, and some people looking for something. So it's really nice to see this variety and these different backgrounds of everybody coming to join us. So we better get on with the business, right? So fast-moving consumer goods are products that are sold quickly and relatively low costs. Okay. And that makes this category one of the important segments in the marketing business, all right? Also, historically, we always heard these stories about FMCG sector being this amazing, the better training ground for younger marketers. So I'll start with you, Paul. As a former Unilever big boss, is FMCG still the biggest training ground for good marketers?
Oh, look, I'm biased, but in my view, yes. And I think you've got to remember that kind of marketing at an FMCG is much more akin to, say, general management, running a business holistically, you know, kind of a perfect blend of logic and magic versus, say, discipline-specific like performance marketing that you might get at a tech firm. So I think that you get that gift of professional training, you know, training on par with Mark Ritzen's MBA, huge investment in broader leadership development, huge expertise and people to draw from. And I think you can sometimes forget actually how lucky you are when you're inside these big corporates and take it for granted. But I think it's also the best training ground, not just the best training ground, but the best playground. If you think about it, you get the opportunity from day one, from a young age, to kind of run your own business and brand. And you get to all of this whilst being paid a salary without having to raise capital yourself. So from a learning perspective, I think it's super cool. I think it's, you know, there's definitely some areas where FMCGs are having to catch up, you know, be that in e-commerce specifically, you know, learning to move faster and to break some of the bureaucracy, learning from startups and local players. And in Unilever's case, it was also a huge amount of investment in how to drive brands with purpose. So the only thing I'd say on that is that I just don't think you can be complacent. And so for me, it was always critical as well to spend a bit of time outside with others in the industry who don't see the world that, you know, the way you do. Hence why I love the Marketing Academy, you know, cool diversity, to make sure you don't get trapped in just one way of doing things. But look, overall, yes. And I think it's telling that Google are recruiting from FMCG and Airbnb's CMO is ex-Unilever. So there has to be something there.
Oh, Lucio, you're on mute.
I know, right? which is kind of rare for me. Did you take a print screen of this? Because it's like really a rare moment when I'm not talking. Paul, is it still mandatory around Unilever, Mondelez, Mars, and all the FMC Kellogg's that you need to have, when you walk in, you need to have a Byron Sharp book under the arm?
No, look, don't get me started on that one, right? It's the principles of marketing started well before Byron Sharp, and maybe if we've got time at the end, someone can ask me more questions on my view on whether that's the, you know, the future or the death of brands.
Let's get some basics, and Drew, and I'm going to pull you for this one. When creating marketing and advertising campaigns for FMCG, what are the things that need to be considered that exists just in FMCG world or in the FMCG industry?
Yeah, I think for me especially, obviously fast by name, fast by nature. I think the evolving pace of the FMCG industry is probably the big thing that we have to deal with. I think working with retailers and obviously we're very much reliant in most instances around getting products in as part of range reviews, and that's really the start of our journey with really getting products in the consumer's hands. So I think that's a big one that's really interesting and obviously something we have to face into. Also, that pace of change can lead you to different headwinds and tailwinds. You can be in 1 week, out a few months later, and you've really got to be agile and be thinking about how your marketing campaigns are coming to market and how you can adapt to depend on what you're doing, what your competitors are doing, and how your products are landing in the market. So I think they're probably the big things around that pace the case for change and how quickly things are moving within the industry.
So how much of this, without putting you in a hard situation, but how much on the beginning when it comes to tactical marketing, tactical advertising, how much you would love your suppliers to be thinking about the relationship you have with trades and the buyers and all this stuff? How much of this you still do to please some of the buyers?
Yeah, obviously from a Mars Wrigley perspective, obviously we're a house of amazing, huge brands globally, and that's very much our starting position. We wouldn't be the company we are today without the likes of Mars and M&M's. So starting there and thinking about the consumer is definitely our piece. We really, internally at Mars Wrigley, we talk about a three-way win. So very much what's right for the consumer, what's right for the customer, and also what's right for the business. And so having those three elements that come together is probably quite critical for us. So yes, there is an element of customer. We really want to partner and build a strong relationship with the customer, but we need to make sure that we're still thinking about what's best for our business, and most importantly, a product's not going to succeed without being right for the consumer.
So you see, I love what you do, Linda. I want to bring you to the conversation now because it's really basically impossible. No, not really. It's basically impossible to compete with all the FMCG giants purely on promotion, right? And you being a much more humble, smaller company, how do you pull all the levers like, I don't know, distribution or scale or price to compete in this in the FMCG?
It's a very good question, but I think we have to start with a bare basic, which is product. Unless you have an incredible product, you know, it is really hard to compete against major FMCG players, but it's really about analyzing your strengths and weaknesses. And yes, we might be competing against big budgets and companies that are dropping their price by 20 to 30%. For us, it's about creating a compelling product and sustainably growing promotions. And that might be through consumer shows. Right now, we're focused more on online digital marketing, using our customers as advocates, and also not just focusing on the major retailers, but going where our FMCG players aren't playing in yet. So using speed and knowing our product positioning, we've sort of delved into export. We've delved into areas where we haven't seen some of our players play in. And also it comes down to product differentiation. I think hands down, you've just got to know what you stand for, why you're different, and why you're so unique. And if you can share that story, if you can communicate it, for us, packaging is probably, it speaks louder than the marketing budgets we have. When people see our product, we say less is more of an approach. We want consumers to be engaged with our product, to go, well, what is this? It doesn't say it's got 50 attributes on the front of the product, but we want to discover what this brand is, where it comes from, maybe look at it on Instagram and connect with it in a different way. So without any FMCG background, we've taken the approach of discovery of consumer behavior and really apply that to our business model.
So do you want to talk as far as you can talk, but do you want to talk a little bit about the consumer behavior and insights on consumer sentiment? How do you pull that? Because if you think about it, I don't know, some of the big ones, whether it's Mars or Mondelez or Unilever, P&G, you have scan data, you have volumes, you can buy, you can do, and it's still hard work. Don't get me wrong, I'm not minimizing that, but without that resources to be collecting the amount of data, the amount of information, how do you still work around that, Linda? How do you get this consumer behavior? How do you get insights and consumer sentiments and things like that to keep moving?
We go back to simplicity. We probably pick apart 3 key insights that we see as being significant, rather than having 500 insights and not knowing which ones to act upon. So number 1, we know that almond milk is 50% of the non-dairy space. Yes, there could be oat, there could be all this other stuff coming around, but we're going to focus on almond. We know that 70% of all almond milk sales are unsweetened, so we're focusing on unsweetened. Do we get access to scan data? Absolutely not. We can't afford it as a small business. We're walking into meetings with buyers and range reviews going, well, we don't have all these insights. We don't have the global statistics of what's happening in the US or the UK. But here's what we've done with our product, and here's what we're seeing on the ground level. Here's what our consumers are saying. And we believe we can continue bringing in new consumers into Woolworths and Coles or into stores by focusing on these core aspects. And again, product differentiation. We know that the majority of our players source almonds from the US or are imported, and we'll continue to share that story around provenance and supporting local and just going at that focus point, really.
So how do you decide, Linda? How do you decide where to focus when you have limited resources and budget, and rather than trying to do everything, you go for impact?
It's a bit of trial and error at the end of the day. I think you've got to start small and simple. We created very clean product with very little messaging. And sometimes the feedback from category managers were, well, we've got ProGut and we've got all these nutritional bits coming through and plant proteins. But what we kept reiterating was there's just a demand for premium quality products. And we still don't see that on supermarket shelves. And we still don't see the local story shown on generally shelves. So we kept going back to those basic truths, irrespective of what's happening in the US that might be 5 years down the track. I think we've got to go back to simplicity and also solving the problems that we see and in supermarkets in general. So dairy right now is being prioritized and there's less supermarket space in the refrigerated section for plant-based products. How do we get our product in if there's no space for plant-based products? Well, we don't have the marketing budgets, but we'll continue to share that story and we'll continue to use our consumers as advocates. If we can't service our consumers via major retailers, we'll focus on online, we'll focus on export, we'll focus on route trade. And I think that's what we've done really well is we just continue to connect with our consumers, we continue to listen to them.
So Paul, Drew, like you both coming from large, really big guys. When you see companies or brands like Linda's brands, what kind of conversations you guys have internally? You see this nowadays as your R&D, M&As kind of go and buy, or you see this as a partnership? So in our case, for ice cream background and the upcoming of the Gelato Messina and all these artisan ice creams, and you, Drew, with chocolate, like few of them. How do you even look these humble, smaller competitors?
Well, I think luckily I never had to go head to head with Linda, right? Anyone that's got a bottle of tequila on their desk means that I think we could all see who would win. But I think there's a bit of a self-perpetuated myth which you can end up accepting as your truth in large FMCG. That, you know, you're slow, you aren't empowered. There's bizarre statements in the press like kind of FMCG has halved its innovation timeline from 24 months to 12 months, which is still just, you know, frankly too slow. And one of the reasons I came to ANZ was kind of just to play around in a space where that doesn't need to be a truth, right? If you think about the Australian market, you've got all the gifts of a global business. You've got a very progressive consumer landscape. You're so far out of sight that if something breaks, really nothing happens. But if it works, you know, it can spin around the world quite quickly. And I think ingrained in the culture here, you've got a very, you know, pioneering spirit. But you have to work to unlock that. And I think, to echo Linda's points, like the first thing is you've got to just take a step back and, you know, think about what are the trends that we want to go after, which are the ones that are kind of ours to kind of own and that we really want to pioneer in, which are the ones that we're happy to let go, and then make some real conscious decisions. You know, can we do that from within our own capability or brands? If so, yes, let's go quickly. And if not, well then, yeah, then should we look to partner? What's the role of M&A? And how can we, you know, acquire real competencies, not necessarily categories, but competencies that the business might not get to quickly enough to compete. And actually, if you look at a lot of Unilever's acquisitions, largely competency-led. So Dollar Shave around e-commerce, Seventh Generation around kind of green cleaning, R&D technology, we surround a format and a fruit manufacturing process which was exemplary in the world. And I think that's where the role of acquisition comes in. But in terms of unlocking that pioneering spirit and pace, right? Because sometimes these businesses can feel, particularly when you're in at a junior level, quite clunky and slow. So 5 things for me. 1, set that ambition and create the culture, and really ask the teams what's getting in the way of us moving quickly, or why can't we get into these spaces? And suddenly you find all these barriers, some of them real and some of them perceived, that could get in the way. I think if you're an ANZ business globally, create a role that makes ANZ sexy for the rest of the world, and therefore kind of the global team will be there to help you, not wonder what's going on and kind of micromanaging or checking, are you following the global brand books, etc., etc. But the big thing is just to put, action over words. Right? Quite often FMCGs, you talk about all these spaces you want to get into, and then it's a brand manager on kind of number 10 on their to-do list that's being asked to explore it. So you've got to create the resources and take risks on some of these bets. Now, for example, when we were at ice cream, we had, we were looking at the online business of ice cream. How do you get ice cream to be synonymous with Uber Eats and Deliveroo? It could have been 50 million in 5 years. But in reality, you had one person looking at it on top of their day job, doing an amazing job. But you're not taking that bet seriously. So I think you've got to take some bets in that space, and then be comfortable that might mean you have less resource or less focus on some of your powerhouse brands or your core business to facilitate you doing that.
Just to add on what Paul was saying. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, you go, Drew.
Just to add on that, I think it's a really good. I completely agree with what Paul's saying. It's getting it to that launch. I think the only thing I would add on top of that, it's not only once you're at launch, but also changing internal attitudes around how things go to market once you're actually in market. I think something that big business struggles with, where you're expected to launch something, it's going to be the next $1 million product within the range. But a lot of the time, where there's great disruptors coming into the market, they're starting small and then nurturing from the beginning. And that takes conversations with your sales team around internal expectations, and then with customers that, if we're talking about Mars, we're not going to be the next M&Ms, but we're going to start and we're going to nurture this until it grows to a future M&Ms, or it's building on the trends that are really evident within the market today.
But Drew, to be well, there are 2 things there, right? First thing is, I've seen, and you probably see even more, I've seen a few times in brand manager get really hooked up in their own bullshit, like, okay, we're going to create this, going to change the world. No, it's just a brand of chocolate. Okay, you can do well, that's absolutely fine, but you're not saving whales. I got there. Second, I sometimes even feel sorry because, to be honest, in a global business, how do you even get shit done in a global organization, right? The question directly to you now, Drew, is: do you have any really freedom to test or localize your price, your promotion? And how do you go about breaking hierarchies? Okay, being agile and taking risks, especially when you're up against agile players like Almond Milk.
Yeah, I think obviously all businesses are different. I think if I talk specifically to Mars Wrigley, we are a global business, and we are, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, chocolate manufacturer in the world. That comes with a lot of freedom. Obviously, from a global perspective, a lot of resource. But that doesn't mean we don't operate as a global push down, execute market. There are some markets how that plays out, but if I take Australia, for example, we're an origination and an execution market. So some brands, it's a balance. And a lot of the time, building those relationship with global teams and having those strong links and elements of trust and working together is going to be what really makes it. So specifically on M&Ms, I've got a global brand director who sits over in Chicago. We meet every 4 weeks. We've got global brand meetings, and a good idea can come from any part of the world. I think more recently that was evidence. If we think back to on Extra, one of our obviously key Wrigley brand and the number 1 gum brand within Australia. Our current general manager, Andrew Leakey, he created the Eat, Drink, Chew campaign, and that started in Australia but went global. So there's a number of examples where good ideas are scaled locally, they start here, and having those relationships and trust and proving, which often Australia does. It often bats above its weight with we're coming up with great ideas, and especially in our business, a lot of those have gone global once they've started here.
Yeah, fair enough. So I want to flip this conversation for a second. And I mean, this year, this 2020, we've seen it all, right? We had bushfires, in February we had floods, in March we have coronavirus, with panic buying. I was watching Jules Lund in the Marketers in Pajamas with Cole's Lisa, the CMO, and she was saying that's pretty much they have sales of 2 Christmas in one day, which is, wow, it's pretty big. So, but at the same time, we're seeing outcomes of these times being loss of incomes and health costs and huge supply chain disruptions. So, we are seeing FMCG products growing with probably toilet papers and I don't know, perhaps milk and some different products going up. But talking specifically about, I mean, we're not going to be talking about coronavirus in the context of future predictions and things like that. Nobody here is skilled enough for this. Nobody in the world, to be honest, is skilled enough for that. But talk specifically about the current situation. How are you adjusting your supply channels, your demand planning, because it's all crazy, right? Budgets and your marketing message. So perhaps we start with you, Linda. How are you readjusting all these things?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I guess for us, exporting, we export currently to 12 countries now. We saw a complete halt. That was our strategy for the last 12 months. Let's focus on export as opposed to the major players. And we saw that come to a grinding halt. We saw our distributors across the east coast of Australia impacted by bushfires. We saw our route trade, so cafes, smoothie bars, really soften in trade. We saw our New Zealand distributors impacted. So all of a sudden, a number of SKUs in the convenience channel that we had launched. So these beautiful flavors, excess stock. It's been our priority to look at ways of reducing that stock and parking that product until we see an uplift back in convenience. But our core focus, which is pantry, our 1 litre almond milk, we've had to readjust forecasting, absolutely. We were fortunate enough to have actually put up a new online store as of January, but all of a sudden online was less than 1% of our business, where customers were getting rates of up to $40 a case of almond milk to buy our almond milk online. So we started looking at how we can reduce those rates. We looked at how we all of a sudden take on 500, 1,000 orders a month, and how we completely shift our teams and their tasks to manage that, that change. But then came marketing, of course. So last year we did over 16 consumer shows. That's how we generally promote our products and sample our products and focus on the quality. We completely cut that entire budget and shifted that online. And by going online, we've seen just an increase in consumer engagement. We've seen an increase in retargeting of our consumers to continue buying online. And that's been really incredible for our business. I think that's why we're still here today. And I see that export is starting to pick up again. So we're just going to be a bit more conservative with our product development roadmap and pick and choose what we believe is going to be more sustainable in the future. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much it really from our end.
What's going on with you, Drew?
Yeah, I think for us, obviously, it is a really interesting time for us in the market and the whole FMCG industry. I think what we really face into, and I think all our peers as well, is making sure those relationships with the customers are strong. Obviously, they're feeling it from a shopper perspective, and they're reacting, and having a strong relationship with them allows us to react and support them with what their needs and the ups and downs of supply and demand. And I think that's consistent across the industry. It's those relationships are becoming very important, and multi relationships from supply chain to our face-to-face sales team as well. Just keeping close there.
Are you amping up? I'm not sure if you can share or not, but are you amping up your advertising budget?
I think it's an interesting time for us globally. I think we're talking from an M&M's perspective. We're very consistent with our messaging. I think I look forward to Paul's perspective on Byron Sharp later on, but the Ehrenberg Bass thinking is very entrenched within our business. So that awareness piece, continuing that messaging is important for us as a business.
So let's go to you, Paul. I'm seeing I'm seeing as a spectator, and from external perspectives, a lot of brands now trying to put a couple of messages out there in terms of advertising and sending purposeful messages out there. Is this the time that brands should be talking and demonstrating their purpose, like the real purpose? How brands can take the high road and start winning through purpose, but also by building businesses based on the future?
Hey, look, it's a great question. I think probably first and foremost, the purpose for me certainly isn't the chocolate brand saving whales. A great purpose-led brand and company is, one that's truly purpose-led, that has a clear view on the impact it wants to make. And it's not always about saving the world. It can just be about, making life better. And you can define what better means to you and what's credible for your category. And I think right now in the current climate, it's kind of, if you're a purpose-led business, it certainly helps with your decision-making. It makes it more intuitive as to what feels right, feels wrong for the brand, where you should show up, where you shouldn't. But it's kind of the question I've been getting the most, actually more broadly, which is there's a huge, overwhelming positive sentiment from the marketing community to want to help and, to show up and to communicate, etc. And so I think you've just got to be very mindful of where people are really at. And so the simplest way I can kind of advise on that is three things. Like, one is listening is key. Like, it's really, really key. Like, take time to actually understand what is really going on for people. Where are they heads? Are they still trying to figure out how to kind of be a parent and get the job done? Whilst you're shouting brand messages and saying, I get it to them, like, really, is that the right time for you to be there? So I think taking the time just to really listen and just go, well, actually, for our stakeholders, be that your suppliers, customers, even your CFO, like, what do they need right now and what's helpful look like? Then from a purpose perspective, if you know your purpose, you can show up quickly and you'll know where you should and where you shouldn't. And if you don't, then I think just think simply about what gifts do you really have to give? It's a bit grim, but if you think about, when someone has an accident, everyone wants to help. Like, they crowd round, they rush to the scene, but really it should only be the person kind of trained in CPR, and everyone else just needs to back off and give some air. And I think that's the hardest thing to do as a marketeer, is to just slow down and breathe and, give some air until it's your time to really make a positive difference. And look, the last thing is timing, just a little bit of patience. DDB have done some cool work on this just to help you plan, think about where people might be on that kind of anger, denial, acceptance. When are they ready to think positively? When do they need just help? And when do they need, new solutions? And show up at the right time. So I think the question's almost the same for most businesses. It's kind of, how do I have a positive impact, but that drives my business? But the lens is just slightly different. So you just got to get out of your own head and get into the shoes of your consumers. And I think lastly, most importantly, is just there is a tale of two cities at the moment. Like, probably 90% of people on this call, COVID has been a huge annoyance and inconvenience and maybe, stressful from a business or a financial perspective. But there's half of Australia that's worrying right now about how they're going to survive, are queuing up outside Centrelink. And so I think it's really important as a brand, before you lean in, you just check, where do my consumers sit on that spectrum? And before I talk to them about purpose or, the future, are they right down the bottom of the Maslow pyramid, just trying to figure out how to get stuff done at the moment? So I think it's the same marketing principles, just applied a little bit quicker, and giving yourself permission to pause versus, rushing to social distance your logo, and, show that you get what's going on.
So Paul, when it comes to purpose, what kind of brands you admire that are doing good work recently? Not necessarily just with the coronavirus, but
I am absolutely fangirling, if that's the right expression, over the team at ABC at the moment. a very simple level, right? They have shown up as the brand that is kind of really getting what's going on with Australia and helping. And as a parent, you know, I've seen them very quickly turn around their assets like Play School to help kids understand what's going on and not freak out, and, you know, understand, but in a very positive way. But they've also been very strategic. You know, they've looked at what's coming up. So as of term 2, the whole ABC Me channel, which you could say had lost its relevance a little bit in their portfolio, is going to be at-home education from term 2. So I think that's super smart, right? It's meaningful, it's impactful, it's bringing people back to the brand. And although it's timely and tactical, it's also very cool because it's going to create habits that will last, right? Like suddenly people are going back to their TV screens, and seeing that as the universal delivery method that can reach all of Australia, not just those of us lucky enough to have a good internet connection. So they, for me, are the pinnacle. You might not think of them as a purpose-led business or brand, but they're standing out from the crowd, I think, at the moment.
Great, thank you, Paul. There's a bunch of questions. I do have questions, a bunch of questions for the audience, but I wanted to, I want to make sure I ask 2 questions before we go to Q&A with everybody. We have a very diverse background of audience tonight, and I'd like to be asking to the panel to give one good tip for agency. If you're an agency, a good tip for marketer and for students. So I'll ask around, just give you a little bit of prompt so I don't get you out of surprise. So Linda, perhaps we get with you. I'm seeing here on the Q&A, I'm seeing on the chat a lot of people praising your efforts and say they admire you and all you're doing. And I know I do have a lot of my students from RMIT and Deakin here, and they dream about working in FMCG. And they also dream working with hustlers and humble players like you. So if you gave one advice for a student trying to get to work in FMCG industry, whether it would be with you or Unilever or someone, what would be the 1 or 2 things they would advise them to think about it?
Good question, Lucio.
Don't,
I guess university, they were the days that really shaped me, and perhaps the frustrations of the lack of practical projects or application of what was happening in the world and all these outdated textbooks. I really took that knowledge that I learned and applied it to every day. I trialed ideas, I connected with companies that I thought could use skills, whether it was social media or blogs back in the days. And I think students really need to believe in their own talents. I'm living proof that you don't need FMCG 10 years experience to launch a brand. You've got all the knowledge, you've got all the skill sets, and if you're willing to go through some pain and trial and error, then absolutely you can start something. And perhaps the biggest reminder is I started Elmo when I was jobless. I was sick with a chronic disease. I had no savings, but yet I believed in my idea and I believed in a brand and what I stood for. And perhaps even in the hardest times like that we're living through at the moment, there is absolutely opportunity for entrepreneurship. So there has never been a better time to look at starting a business or looking at solving problems of today. When it comes to marketers, I'd say absolutely focus on why it's so important to support local brands. And I think that story we've played back so many years and yet it hasn't stuck. Perhaps it's becoming more and more relevant, how we collaborate together with other brands that need our support. That's perhaps a great opportunity. And for agencies, I think digital online, it's rapidly changing, but there are so many brands that do need help, and there's a lot of companies that could collaborate with agencies to really understand how they jump online and how they connect more with our own customers.
Thank you. Drew, I'm going to ask you about agencies, whether it's digital or even smaller agencies. You manage a bunch of portfolios, a really fun portfolios you had across your career, and we know that sometimes there's a need of tactical, fast execution because we need some reach. What are the one or two things that absolutely, if someone were to get to pitch you one day or getting attention one day as an agent, as a provider, what would be the one or two things they need to bring to you?
That's a great question. I just have to check if my details going to be passed out. Is this tomorrow? My inbox is going to be full. Is that where this is going?
Let's just establish that you're not pitching. Let's just establish that it's not pitch going on.
I'll take a general. I think sometimes it comes to our advantage, but obviously us as a business, we're global, and we look to global opportunities with agencies, and that's often the first place we start. I think as we evolve as a business, we're looking for more agile ways in, and I think the digital space is obviously something that is important to us, and for us to evolve as a business, we need to play harder there. We really need to evolve and have a right to play and have a good strategy in there. So I think new technologies obviously is something that we all see value in. I think when agencies come and talk to us, the most important thing that I always brief them if they're just coming to share is make it relevant. I think really what are those true insights that are relevant for everyone in the room that they can really anchor to and learn something from. Yes, we might not be able to open the door and let everyone in because of global agreements, but if there's something in there that we can really learn from, I think that just starts the conversation and adds value no matter where the relationship goes.
Thank you. And Paul, finally with you, we have a big number of marketers, corporate marketers here. So some might agree that the biggest role, the most important role for marketer is to build distinct brands. There'll be Mark Ritzen's position. So what is the one or two things that marketers and FMCG should absolutely be putting on their effort and their mind into? There are more than one, I understand, but
I think there's kind of it's an odd combination, right? I think Linda mentioned earlier about you asked Linda earlier about data. I think data can sometimes get in the way of you remembering to understand people as humans and just getting out into the real world and staying grounded and kind of just understanding real people's lives. Particularly as your point earlier, like these are products that touch half of Australia, and very large portions of your consumer base don't live in Sydney in the North Shore or in the eastern suburbs, right? So finding ways of just getting out and understanding what's going on in real people's lives, and not going in there like some bizarre FMCG detective, like going, what do you think about shampoo? Like that's a weird question. And that person will then tell you all the things they think about shampoo, but I guarantee they don't think about shampoo at all. So you kind of got to start a lot broader and try and understand people's lives holistically to see where you can find insights and play a role. Just keep asking why. Just be that annoyingly like why person. So that's kind of on the grounded level. And then I think, I'm a big believer, Adam Ferrier's kind of philosophy about, the customer isn't always right. Take time to look at what macro trends are going on in the world and what might materialize as opportunities in the next 10 years. And where you could innovate based on those, right? Because if you're always just focusing on what people need a little bit more of, then by nature, you've got an iterative 1%, 2% business where you're launching another flavor, not the next big thing. And so I think that's my advice. Like as simple as it is, just stay really bloody grounded in real people's lives, and then find time to kind of dream about the future from a macro trend perspective before you start thinking about your category analytics, your scan data, or how well your half price performed last week in Coles, which can suddenly kind of send you into analysis paralysis, right? You're just kind of just staring at data, but not really sure what questions you're asking anymore. So that I think is the watch out kind of as we get more data, just to kind of remember to stay quite human.
Thank you. So I had a bunch of other questions here, but I'm going to stop asking you. We're going to go to the Q&A. I also had asked, so to everybody participating in this webinar, I had asked Paul, Drew, and Linda to share with us their favorite campaigns. So just be tuned on the email that General Assembly will be sending to you following up the recording of this session with the links to their favorite ads and their favorite campaigns. We're going to keep this secret, so you open emails, let's just get some questions, all right? Ready for that? So I have a first question from Kenny, our friend Kenny Hill. What have you seen from all the FMCG brands here in Australia recently that you really admire, and why? Who wants to take that question? A couple of seconds to think.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit. Look, I think some categories are good inspiration for how you can transform quite quickly, versus others that are kind of, just playing around on the edges of new trends. And I think as a holistic level, take the yogurt category, maybe not the most sexy, but the yogurt category used to be bright colors, high sugars, big bold print, Munch Bunch cartoon characters on the kids' offerings, with a couple of healthy probiotic offerings, hidden in the background for, the Weight Watchers community. And I think collectively, but through, a combination of small players and large players in that space, you now walk into that category and the heartland is health. The kids' products are nutrition first, but fun and exciting and not dull. And actually, the laggard parts of that category have become quite small quite quickly. So I think that's just a good example of how, that category could have become quite irrelevant quite quickly just by playing it safe. But they've innovated very quickly from a format perspective, from a product perspective, and been willing to kind of sacrifice some of the holy grail brands or the holy grail SKUs to get on the bandwagon and drive new trends to bring people back into a category that was kind of losing its relevance to people. So I think that's a kind of a super cool space. And of course, Almo, in a very similar space.
Anything, Drew, anything, Linda, notable and you like to say besides almond milk and M&Ms?
I think a lot of brands are doing a lot in the background. We're just not seeing it. And I think a lot more companies are realizing that action is character. Just go out and do it. If you want to donate stock, if you want to support those that are most vulnerable, things like we've been donating to Food Bank, for example. We're not sharing that on social media. We don't have to receive praise, but we are doing small things in the background just to support those that are in need. Even engaging with our customers as well that might be struggling financially. We'll offer coupons if we can help. We'll support our most loyal customers. And I think a lot of brands are doing that in the background. We're probably not seeing evidence of that. And I guess that's just really the tough situation we're in. I think it's taking a very humble approach.
Yeah, I'd agree to what Linda said. I think it's what brands are doing in the background that a lot of people aren't seeing. I think globally, we've made a lot of commitments, sizable commitments to especially developing markets who will be obviously negatively affected by this, especially the way it's playing out and the current environment. So those kind of donations and those kind of actions often aren't seen. And I think if I talk specifically about Mars Wrigley, that gives me, I think it's a balance about not only what the consumer sees, but also it's all those people who work for the business and give them confidence that what they're contributing to their work is actually contributing to a better purpose on a global scale. So I think that's the great thing about being in a family business like Mars is that they do put those, firstly, they put the associates and make sure everyone's safe and in the right environment, but are also thinking about the broader impact and positive impact we can have as a global business at these times.
Perfect. I have so many other questions. Everything's very interesting, and but we do have a few minutes before we go, so I got to be very careful. I'm going to bundle two questions, and we have about 3 minutes before we finish, and we want to finish this on time. There's a bunch of general questions here, but one is around pricing. Mark Ritson says that as a marketer, we completely forgot about how to calculate price. So different questions, and perhaps some of you can put hands up. Pricing FMCG, who owns and how do you coordinate that? Paul?
That's a can of worms question. Well, like, where do you start with pricing? Like, I think.
So 30 seconds then.
Let's keep it really simple. I think the two simple things maybe to kind of talk about pricing without it becoming, very boring and about Coles and Woolies and the half price nature of the market, blah, blah, blah. Two things, Ron. I think I completely echo Linda's point that pricing helps build your brand, right? So particularly a retail price, it sets an expectation for what I'm getting. And I still love the story. Forget the market, but at one point Smirnoff, were at risk of being undercut by a new market entrant who came in 20% lower. So instead of following them down, they did two things. They launched a premium brand above themselves that then meant their core offering looked more affordable. And they priced up on their core to make you question why the vodka next to them was so cheap. Yeah, kind of that price difference to a degree then kind of created that question in people's minds around why is that one $5 when Smirnoff is 10? Maybe I'll just stick with a more trusted option. So I think the most important thing in pricing, and there's a fantastic book called Priceless, and a few talks from Rory Sutherland on perspective, is just to think about how you hinge that pricing to give it context. Kind of $10 a week, $10 a month for Netflix doesn't sound like a lot compared to Foxtel. But it's quite a lot in a year. If I said, give me $120 up front, you might flinch. So I think it's more about understanding the behavioral economics of pricing. And then there's all the grit that sits behind it in terms of, elasticity and modeling and et cetera, which is kind of a bit more table stake.
Drew, do you want to collaborate anything around pricing before we wrap up?
Firstly, if my legal team are on the phone, they'd like me to say pricing is at the sole discretion of the retailer. So I'll tick that box. I think talking to Linda's point, it's around what consumers value and really building there. Obviously, we want to start, and we do start with anything we do, we're thinking about the consumer first and what that desire, and that should be the starting point for any good product. So where that consumer value and how you can display that and take the customer on the journey around pricing, I think is what the good model should look like. But a journey for any customers, or for any, FMCG companies to go through with the retailer environment that we have in Australia.
Perfect. So before we go, I have so much I want to ask you. I want to ask you about Bar and Shark. I want to ask you about the rise of private label. I want to ask you about the utilization of digital and social e-commerce, budgets in COVID, a little bit more purpose. Paul, there's so much you can collaborate on there. Building up distribution channels on Linda, there's so much. Maybe we need to do another session of this. It's fun. Maybe I'll have less wine because I smashed 2 glasses of wine like that, like quickly. I should have some M&Ms and some food here with me. But having said that, I need to wrap up. I need to respect everybody's time. So I just like to go around the room and ask you any last messages you'd like to give to our attendees. So any last words, perhaps starting with you, Linda. Do you like to leave any last words around the world of FMCG? How we should be looking, if you want a job, whatever you want. What is the wrap up? What is the most important thing around FMCG?
Know your values.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't matter what you want to sell, what you want to create. It's all about distilling and coming back to your values personally and professionally and for the company you work for. Our number one value is health, and never has there been a better time to share that message with our consumers, with those that have never seen our brand, and really have that focus. If you don't have those values, if they're wishy-washy, if there's 20 of them, maybe it's time to reevaluate and think about how you really do build that into both your products, how you treat people, how you connect with your customers, how you hire in the future, what you create. Never has there been a more important time to know your values.
Paul, do you want to follow up on that?
Oh, how do you follow that? No, so I agree with Linda. Like, knowing your values is hugely powerful. My plea, and particularly maybe to the student audience, is that if you are one of those people that sees or feels that you've got kind of a gift and you're commercially smart and brand led, but also you're passionate about kind of social good, put yourself into the tough places where that isn't done and prove it to be true. Now, there is a real myth that you can only do that sort of work if you jump into the thank yous of the world. And I love that business. But the challenge for me is to take those amazing people that are commercially brilliant, socially passionate, and get them into the brands and businesses where that isn't necessarily true yet, and make it happen. Because if you prove it there, then it becomes the norm. So that's very targeted at the student community, because I wish someone had told me that when I was just trying to figure out how to get a job, and choosing between making money and working in a not-for-profit.
Well, you, Drew.
Yeah, I think to build on Paul's point, I think passion is undervalued today. I think, most recently going through recruitment and seeing people who want to get into the industry or want to get into an opportunity at Mars Wrigley, that shines through. And to be honest, I look for that now. I personally am passionate about the industry. I love products. I love food products. I've grown up like that. And that passion is the reason that I'm in this job. And I want people that around me that also share that passion and want to come to work every day and be proud to the company they work in, and can contribute based on that excitement to be there.
Alrighty, so that's the time I need to wrap up. We will be sending the recording of this video to all the audience with the preferred marketing campaigns from Linda, from Drew, and from Paul. Also with some links. Some people ask about the book here, Paul, the author. We'll find these, we'll share with you. So I'd like to thank you, Paul. I'd like to thank you, Drew. I'd like to thank you, Linda. Valuable insights. It's a shame we have just 1 hour, but perhaps we can do a second round, second session. So thank you for sticking with us, all the participants of today's webinar. We have another one coming. We have the next month we'll be running on the 28th of May. We're going to be running the retail, 5 things in retail. It's going to be lovely. So having said that, that's the end of tonight. We all can have dinner, can have more wines. Thank you very much. I wish you all a great night. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lucio.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us, and a big thanks to our guests for sharing their insight on today's topic. And also just a reminder that there will be a recording of the webinar sent out within the next week. We're always looking for ways to improve our free event, so please take a couple of minutes to fill out our feedback form listed on the screen, just that link there. If you do have any questions about GA, feel free to send us an email to Sydney, Melbourne, or Singapore. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.